I was 32 years old, a single mother working 2 jobs to keep my daughter in what I thought was a good school, when they expelled her for standing up to bullies who were tormenting a smaller girl. I had no idea that the principal who coldly told me, "Violence isn't tolerated here," while ignoring months of documented harassment, would one day be sitting across from me in a conference room, her face draining of color as she realized I was now the district superintendent with the power to decide her school's future. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I always love seeing our global community come together. If you enjoy stories about justice, standing up for what's right, and how protecting our children can lead to unexpected transformations, make sure to hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these inspiring true stories. Now, let me take you back to that devastating afternoon 7 years ago when I was just another exhausted parent trying to do right by my child, with no idea that the worst day of our lives would set us both on a path to something extraordinary. The call came at 2:15 on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of restocking shelves at the grocery store where I worked mornings, my phone buzzing insistently in my pocket. When I saw Westridge Academy on the screen, my heart dropped. Westridge was the kind of private school I could barely afford. The kind where I'd taken on extra shifts and sold my car to cover tuition because I believed it would give my daughter Maya the opportunities I never had. The kind of school where I always felt like I was one payment away from not belonging, where other parents arrived in luxury cars while I took 2 buses to get there. "Mrs. Chen, this is Principal Whitmore. I need you to come to my office immediately. There's been an incident involving your daughter." Her voice was cold, clipped, with none of the warmth she'd shown during the admissions interview when she'd praised Maya's test scores and talked about the school's commitment to nurturing every child's potential. My hands were shaking as I pulled off my work apron and begged my manager for an early break. The bus ride to Westridge took 35 minutes, each one stretching like an hour as I imagined what could have happened. Maya was 10 years old, quiet and bookish, the kind of kid who spent recess reading in the library rather than playing on the playground. She'd never been in trouble, never even gotten a warning about talking in class. The worst thing she'd ever done was forget her homework once. When I finally rushed into the administrative building, still wearing my grocery store uniform with my name tag crooked on my chest, I found Maya sitting outside the principal's office. Her face was streaked with tears, her right hand wrapped in an ice pack, and her shirt was torn at the collar. But what stopped me cold was the look in her eyes. Not fear or guilt, but a kind of fierce determination I'd never seen before. "Baby, what happened?" I knelt beside her chair, gently touching her face, checking for injuries. "I'm not sorry, Mom," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'd do it again." Before I could ask what she meant, Principal Whitmore's door opened. She was a tall woman in her 50s, always impeccably dressed, with the kind of polished appearance that made me acutely aware of my wrinkled work clothes and the fact that I hadn't had time to fix my hair. Behind her stood another girl I recognized, Sophia Hartley, daughter of one of the school's biggest donors. Sophia's uniform was pristine, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and she was flanked by both her parents, who looked at Maya and me like we were something unpleasant they'd stepped in. "Mrs. Chen, please come in. Maya, you stay here." Principal Whitmore's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The office was everything I'd expected. Mahogany furniture, leather chairs, walls covered with photos of Principal Whitmore with various dignitaries and successful alumni. I perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, feeling small and out of place, while the Hartleys settled into the chairs beside me as if they owned them. Mr. Hartley was a prominent attorney, and Mrs. Hartley served on the school board. I'd seen them at school events, always at the center of attention, always treated with the kind of deference that came with money and influence. "I'll get straight to the point," Principal Whitmore said, folding her hands on her desk. "Your daughter physically attacked Sophia during lunch today. She pushed her to the ground and struck her multiple times. "We have zero tolerance for violence at Westridge Academy." The words hit me like a physical blow. Maya attacked someone? That's impossible. There must be some mistake. "There's no mistake," Mrs. Hartley interjected, her voice sharp. "My daughter has bruises. Your daughter is clearly troubled and doesn't belong in a school like this." What Maya did was unacceptable, regardless of any perceived provocation, Principal Whitmore continued. "Westridge Academy has a strict code of conduct. Violence of any kind results in immediate expulsion. I'm sorry, but Maya can no longer attend this school." The room seemed to tilt. Expulsion. The word echoed in my head. All those extra shifts, all those sacrifices, the belief that I was giving my daughter a better future, all of it crumbling in an instant. But something in Principal Whitmore's phrasing caught my attention. "Perceived provocation?" I repeated. "What does that mean? What happened before Maya supposedly attacked Sophia?" "It doesn't matter what happened before," Mr. Hartley said dismissively. "Your daughter committed assault. In the real world, that's a crime." "It matters to me," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Maya has never been violent. Ever. Something must have happened to make her act this way." Principal Whitmore sighed, as if I was being deliberately difficult. "According to witnesses, there was a verbal disagreement between Sophia and another student. Maya inserted herself into the situation and became physical. The details of the disagreement are irrelevant. We cannot have students taking matters into their own hands." "What other student?" I pressed. "Can I talk to them? Can I hear Maya's side of the story?" "Mrs. Chen, I understand you're upset, but the decision has been made. Maya is expelled effective immediately. You'll need to collect her belongings and withdraw her from the school. We'll provide records for her transfer to another institution." I looked at the Hartleys, sitting there so smug and satisfied, and then at Principal Whitmore, who wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't about justice or school policy. This was about power and money, and which families mattered at Westridge Academy. "I want to hear what Maya has to say," I said firmly. "I want to know exactly what happened, from start to finish. And I want to know why you're so quick to expel her without a proper investigation." "There has been a proper investigation," Principal Whitmore said coldly. "Multiple teachers witnessed the physical altercation. The facts are clear." "Did any of those teachers witness what led up to it? Did anyone ask Maya why she did what she did? Or did you just decide that the daughter of wealthy donors must be telling the truth, and the scholarship kid must be lying?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Hartley's face flushed with anger, and Principal Whitmore's expression hardened into something that looked almost like contempt. "I think we're done here," Principal Whitmore said, standing up. "Please collect your daughter and leave the premises. Security will escort you if necessary." I stood too, my legs shaking but my resolve hardening. "Fine, but I'm going to find out what really happened. And if Maya was defending herself or someone else, if there's more to this story than you're telling me, I will make sure everyone knows how Westridge Academy treats students who don't come from the right families." "Are you threatening us?" Mr. Hartley stood, his voice rising. "Because I can assure you, you don't want to make an enemy of this family." "I'm not threatening anyone," I said quietly. "I'm just telling you that the truth matters, even if it's inconvenient for you." I walked out of that office with my head high, even though I wanted to cry. Maya jumped up when she saw me, searching my face for answers. "Pack up your things, sweetheart," I said softly. "We're leaving." "I'm expelled, aren't I?" Her voice was small now, the fierce determination fading into the reality of what had happened. "Yes, but before we go, I need you to tell me everything. I need to know exactly what happened and why you did what you did." We sat in my car in the parking lot, and Maya told me the story that Principal Whitmore hadn't wanted me to hear. For months, Sophia and her friends had been bullying a girl named Emma Lynn. Emma was small for her age, shy, and her family had recently immigrated from Taiwan. She spoke English with an accent, and she ate different food in the cafeteria, and those things had made her a target. The bullying had started small, whispered comments and deliberate exclusion, but it had escalated. They'd knocked her books out of her hands, tripped her in the hallways, posted mean comments about her online, and stolen her lunch money. Emma had reported it to teachers multiple times. Her parents had come to the school and filed formal complaints. Maya had seen the documentation herself because Emma had shown her the copies her parents kept. But nothing had changed. The teachers told Emma to ignore it, that girls would be girls, that she needed to develop a thicker skin. Principal Whitmore had met with Emma's parents and assured them she would handle it, but the bullying had only gotten worse. Today at lunch, they surrounded her. Maya said, her voice breaking. Sophia and 3 other girls. They were saying horrible things about her family, about how they didn't belong here, about how Emma smelled like weird food and talked funny. Emma was crying, and she kept asking them to stop, but they just laughed. And then Sophia grabbed Emma's lunch and threw it on the floor, and everyone was laughing and taking videos on their phones. Tears were streaming down Maya's face now, and I held her hand, my own anger building with every word. I couldn't just stand there, Mom. I couldn't. Everyone else was just watching or laughing, and Emma was so small and scared. And I thought about how you always taught me to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. So I walked over and told them to stop. I told them they were being cruel, and that Emma hadn't done anything to them. What did they do? Sophia got in my face and told me to mind my own business or I'd be next. She said her dad could have my scholarship taken away, that I was only at Westridge because the school needed to fill a diversity quota, that I didn't really belong there any more than Emma did. And then she pushed Emma, hard, and Emma fell and hit her head on the table. My blood ran cold. Emma hit her head? Was she okay? She was bleeding a little, and she was crying so hard. The lunch monitor finally came over, but she didn't do anything to Sophia. She just helped Emma up and told her to go to the nurse. And Sophia was laughing, Mom. She was laughing about hurting someone. So I pushed her. I pushed her away from Emma, and she fell down. And then I hit her. I hit her twice before teachers pulled me off. I know it was wrong to hit her, but I was so angry, and no one was protecting Emma, and I couldn't let her keep hurting people. I pulled Maya into my arms and let her cry. My daughter, my sweet, bookish daughter who'd never been in a fight in her life, had risked everything to protect someone who was being hurt. She'd seen injustice and couldn't walk away, even knowing what it might cost her. I was heartbroken that she'd been expelled, terrified about how we'd afford another school. But underneath all of that, I was so incredibly proud of her. You did the right thing, I told her. Not the hitting. We'll talk about better ways to handle things like that. But standing up for Emma, refusing to be a bystander, that took real courage. I'm proud of you, baby. But I'm expelled. I ruined everything. All your extra work, all the money you spent on tuition, I threw it all away. You didn't throw anything away. Westridge Academy threw you away because you exposed something ugly about their school. They'd rather expel a girl who stood up to bullying than deal with the fact that the bullies come from wealthy families who donate money. That's not your fault. That's their failure, not yours. Over the next few days, I tried to piece together what had really happened. I called Emma's parents, who were devastated to learn that Maya had been expelled for defending their daughter. They told me they'd been trying to get the school to address the bullying for 6 months, that they had documentation of every incident, every ignored complaint, every dismissive response from teachers and administrators. Emma had become so anxious about going to school that she'd started having panic attacks. Her grades had dropped. She'd stopped eating lunch to avoid the cafeteria. "We're immigrants," Mrs. Lin told me, her voice heavy with frustration and sadness. "We don't have money or connections. When we complained, they made us feel like we were overreacting, like we didn't understand American school culture. They told us Emma needed to integrate better, to try harder to fit in. As if being bullied was her fault for being different." I also learned that Maya wasn't the first student to be expelled for standing up to Sophia and her friends. 2 years earlier, a boy had been expelled for threatening behavior after he'd confronted Sophia's group for bullying his younger sister. The family had tried to fight it, but the Hartleys' attorney had threatened them with a lawsuit, and they'd backed down. The pattern was clear. Westridge Academy protected its wealthy donors' children at all costs, and anyone who challenged that system was removed. Finding a new school for Maya was harder than I'd expected. Most private schools wanted to know why she'd left Westridge, and when they learned she'd been expelled for fighting, they weren't interested in hearing the full story. Public schools were overcrowded and underfunded, but we didn't have other options. I enrolled Maya in Lincoln Middle School, a public school in our district that had a reputation for being rough around the edges, but had dedicated teachers who genuinely cared about their students. The transition was difficult. Maya went from a school with new textbooks and state-of-the-art facilities to one where the building was old, the resources were limited, and class sizes were twice as large. But something unexpected happened. At Lincoln, Maya found teachers who listened to her, who valued her intelligence and her compassion, who saw her as a whole person rather than just a scholarship student who should be grateful for the opportunity. She found friends who accepted her for who she was, who thought it was cool rather than weird that she loved reading and could speak Mandarin. And she stayed in touch with Emma, whose parents finally withdrew her from Westridge after the incident. Emma enrolled at Lincoln too, and the two girls became inseparable. I watched them support each other, heal together, and grow stronger from what they'd been through. As for me, I was angry. The injustice of what had happened to Maya, to Emma, to all the other students who'd been failed by a system that valued money over morality. It burned in me like a fire that wouldn't go out. I started attending school board meetings, speaking during public comment periods about accountability and the need to address bullying in all schools, not just the ones where parents couldn't afford attorneys. I volunteered with parent advocacy groups, learning about education policy and students' rights. One night, about 6 months after Maya's expulsion, I was at a school board meeting when a woman approached me. Her name was Dr. Patricia Morrison, and she was a member of the State Board of Education. She'd been following my advocacy work and was impressed by my passion and knowledge. "Have you ever considered going back to school?" she asked me. "Getting your teaching credential or a degree in education administration? We need people like you in the system, people who understand what it's like to be on the outside, who will fight for all students, not just the privileged ones." I laughed, a bitter sound. I barely finished my bachelor's degree while working full-time and raising Maya alone. I can't afford graduate school. "There are programs," she said. "Scholarships, grants, pathways for people who want to make a difference. Let me send you some information." I didn't think much of it at the time, but Dr. Morrison was persistent. She sent me information about a program that provided full funding for working parents who wanted to pursue careers in education administration. The program was competitive, but it covered tuition, provided a stipend for living expenses, and included mentorship from experienced administrators. It seemed too good to be true, but Dr. Morrison encouraged me to apply. I spent weeks on that application, writing essays about my experiences, my vision for education, my belief that every student deserved to be seen and valued regardless of their family's wealth or status. Maya helped me proofread, and Emma's mother, who had been a teacher in Taiwan, gave me feedback on my ideas. When I finally submitted it, I tried not to hope too much. People like me didn't get opportunities like this. but I did get it. The acceptance letter arrived 3 months later, and I cried when I read it. I was going to graduate school. I was going to become an education administrator. I was going to be in a position to actually change things, to protect students like Maya and Emma, to hold schools accountable for creating safe, equitable environments for all children. The next 4 years were the hardest of my life. I worked part-time, went to school full-time, and still tried to be present for Maya as she navigated middle school and then high school. There were nights when I fell asleep over textbooks, mornings when I wasn't sure I could keep going, moments when the stress felt overwhelming. But every time I wanted to quit, I thought about that day in Principal Whitmore's office, about the smug certainty on the Hartleys' faces, about all the students who'd been failed by administrators who cared more about donations than doing what was right. I earned my master's degree in education administration with honors. I did my practicum at Lincoln Middle School, where I'd sent Maya, and learned from administrators who worked with limited resources but unlimited dedication. I wrote my thesis on addressing bullying in schools and the ways that socioeconomic disparities affected how complaints were handled. Dr. Morrison became my mentor, guiding me through the complex world of education policy and politics. After graduation, I took a position as an assistant principal at a struggling elementary school in the district. The pay wasn't great, but I loved the work. I implemented new anti-bullying programs, created systems for tracking and responding to complaints, and worked to build a school culture where every student felt safe and valued. Within 2 years, our school's climate surveys showed dramatic improvement, and other schools started asking about our programs. My reputation grew. I became known as someone who got results, who could turn around troubled schools, who genuinely cared about students and families. I moved up to principal of a middle school, then to an area superintendent position overseeing multiple schools. Each promotion brought more responsibility and more opportunity to make systemic changes. Maya thrived, too. She graduated from high school with honors, earned a full scholarship to college, and decided to major in social work. She wanted to help vulnerable kids, to be an advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. Emma went into education, determined to be the kind of teacher who would protect her students the way Maya had protected her. Both girls had taken the worst experience of their young lives and transformed it into purpose and passion. 7 years after Maya's expulsion, I was named district superintendent. It was the culmination of everything I'd worked for, the position that would give me the power to implement real, lasting change across all the schools in the district. I was responsible for overseeing 42 schools, thousands of students, hundreds of teachers and administrators. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. One of my first tasks as superintendent was to conduct comprehensive reviews of all schools in the district, examining everything from academic performance to school climate to how complaints were handled. I assembled a team of administrators, teachers, parents, and community members to help with the reviews. We were looking for patterns, for problems that needed to be addressed, for best practices that could be shared. When the list of schools to be reviewed came across my desk, I saw it there. Westridge Academy. My heart skipped a beat. Westridge was a private school, but it received some public funding through a partnership program that allowed a small number of low-income students to attend on subsidized tuition. That funding meant they fell under certain district oversight requirements, including periodic reviews to ensure they were meeting standards for all students, not just those who could afford full tuition. I could have assigned the review to someone else. It would have been the professional thing to do, given my personal history with the school. But I didn't. I wanted to see for myself what had changed, if anything, in the 7 years since they'd expelled my daughter for defending a bullied child. The review was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in October. I assembled my team: 2 assistant superintendents, a parent advocate, and a representative from the State Board of Education. We would be meeting with Principal Whitmore and her administrative team to review their policies, examine their complaint records, and discuss their school climate data. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a tailored navy suit and the kind of professional accessories that signaled authority and competence. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 7 years ago, I'd been a grocery store clerk in a wrinkled uniform, intimidated and powerless. Now I was the district superintendent, and I was about to walk back into the school that had thrown my daughter away like she didn't matter. Maya called me that morning, as she often did before big meetings. She was in her 2nd year of college now, confident and happy, still the compassionate girl who couldn't stand by while someone was hurt. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "I keep thinking about that day in Principal Whitmore's office, how small I felt, how powerless." "You're not that person anymore, Mom. You're the superintendent. You have the power now, and you're going to use it to protect kids like Emma, like me, like all the students who need someone to stand up for them." "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Go show them what happens when you underestimate a mother protecting her child." The drive to Westridge Academy was surreal. The campus looked exactly as I remembered it. Manicured lawns, impressive brick buildings, the kind of place that screamed prestige and privilege. I parked in the visitor lot, and my team gathered around me. They knew my history with this school. I'd been transparent about it, wanted them to understand why this review mattered so much to me personally. "Remember," I told them, "we're here to ensure all students are being served equitably, that complaints are being handled properly, and that school climate is healthy for everyone, not just the families who can afford full tuition. We follow the protocol, we ask the hard questions, and we don't accept surface-level answers." We walked into the administrative building together, and I was immediately transported back 7 years. The same expensive furniture, the same photos on the walls, even the same receptionist who'd looked at me with barely concealed disdain when I'd arrived in my work clothes. She looked up as we entered, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw the official district identification badges we all wore. "We're here for the scheduled review with Principal Whitmore," I said, my voice steady and professional. "I'm Superintendent Chen." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at my title, and she quickly picked up the phone to announce our arrival. While we waited, I looked around the lobby, noting the trophy cases full of academic and athletic awards, the donor recognition wall with plaques bearing names like Hartley and Morrison and Chen. "Wait, Chen?" I moved closer to the wall and found it, a small plaque acknowledging a donation made in Maya's name. It had been placed there 3 years ago, according to the date. I had no idea who had done this or why, but seeing my daughter's name on that wall, in the school that had expelled her, felt like a strange kind of vindication. "Superintendent Chen?" A voice behind me made me turn. Principal Whitmore stood in the doorway to her office, and the moment she saw my face, all the color drained from hers. She knew exactly who I was. She remembered. "Principal Whitmore," I said pleasantly, extending my hand. "Thank you for meeting with us today. I believe we have a lot to discuss about Westridge Academy's policies and practices." She took my hand automatically, her grip weak and uncertain. Her eyes darted between me and my team, clearly trying to process what was happening, trying to understand how the woman she'd dismissed so contemptuously 7 years ago was now standing in her school as the district superintendent with the power to determine Westridge's future. "Yes, of course," she stammered. "Please come in. My administrative team is already assembled." We filed into the large conference room adjacent to her office. Seated around the table were several administrators and teachers, all looking professional and prepared for a routine review. But Principal Whitmore's agitation was palpable, and it was starting to affect the others. They could sense something was wrong, that this wasn't going to be the simple formality they'd expected. I took my seat at the head of the table, my team flanking me, and opened my briefcase to pull out the extensive file we'd compiled on Westridge Academy. It included enrollment data, complaint records, incident reports, and interviews with current and former students and families. We'd done our homework. "Let's begin," I said, my voice calm and professional. Westridge Academy receives significant public funding through the District Partnership Program, which means you're required to meet certain standards regarding equity, access, and student welfare. Our review today will focus on 3 main areas: how you serve your subsidized tuition students compared to full-paying students, how you handle complaints of bullying and harassment, and your overall school climate data. I watched Principal Whitmore's face as I spoke, saw the growing dread in her eyes as she realized this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. This was a real review, with real consequences. "Let's start with your complaint records," I continued, opening the file. "Over the past 5 years, you've received 47 formal complaints from parents regarding bullying, harassment, or discrimination. Of those 47 complaints, 39 came from families of subsidized tuition students. Can you explain that disparity?" Principal Whitmore glanced at her assistant principal, a nervous-looking man who shuffled through papers in front of him. "Well, we take all complaints seriously. The disparity might be due to different cultural expectations about what constitutes bullying, or perhaps subsidized families are more likely to file formal complaints rather than handle issues informally." "Interesting theory?" I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Let's look at the resolution of those complaints." Of the 39 complaints from subsidized families, only 3 resulted in any disciplinary action against the accused students. The other 36 were closed with notations like insufficient evidence, students counseled, or matter resolved informally. "Can you walk me through your investigation process for these complaints?" The assistant principal cleared his throat. "We interview all parties involved, gather witness statements, and make a determination based on the evidence. Sometimes complaints are exaggerated or based on misunderstandings." "I see. And in cases where there were multiple complaints about the same students engaging in bullying behavior, what was your response?" Silence. Principal Whitmore and her team exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. I pulled out a specific file, one I'd been saving. "Let me give you an example. 7 years ago, a student named Emma Lynn filed 5 separate complaints over a 6-month period about being bullied by a group of students led by Sophia Hartley. Emma's parents also filed formal complaints and provided documentation of the harassment. According to your records, all 5 complaints were closed with no disciplinary action against Sophia or her friends. Can you explain why?" Principal Whitmore's face went from pale to flushed. That was a long time ago. I don't recall the specific details." "Let me refresh your memory," I said, my voice hardening slightly. Emma Lynn was a subsidized tuition student from an immigrant family. Sophia Hartley was the daughter of major donors to the school. The bullying included verbal harassment, physical intimidation, theft, and eventually a physical assault that resulted in Emma hitting her head and requiring medical attention. Despite all of this being documented and reported, no action was taken against Sophia or her friends. I paused, letting that sink in, then continued. However, when another student, Maya Chen, physically intervened to protect Emma during that final assault, she was expelled within hours. No investigation, no consideration of the circumstances, just immediate expulsion for violence. Does that seem like equitable treatment to you, Principal Whitmore? The room was completely silent. Everyone was staring at me now, and several people had made the connection. My assistant superintendent, who knew the full story, was watching Principal Whitmore with an expression of cold judgment. "Maya Chen was your daughter," Principal Whitmore said quietly, finally meeting my eyes. Yes, she was. And she was expelled from this school for having the courage to protect another student when your administration refused to do so. She was expelled for standing up to bullies who had been tormenting Emma for months while you looked the other way because their parents donated money to the school. Mrs. Chen. Superintendent Chen. I'm sorry. The situation was complicated. It wasn't complicated, I said firmly. It was a clear case of bullying that you failed to address because you were more concerned with keeping wealthy donors happy than protecting vulnerable students. And according to our research, it wasn't an isolated incident. We've identified a pattern of complaints from subsidized students being dismissed or minimized, while students from wealthy families face little to no consequences for their behavior. I pulled out more files, spreading them across the table. We've interviewed 23 former students and families who left Westridge over the past 5 years. 17 of them were subsidized tuition students who left because of bullying, harassment, or discrimination that the school failed to address. That's a retention rate of less than 40% for your subsidized population, compared to 92% for full-paying students. That disparity alone is grounds for reviewing your eligibility for public funding. Principal Whitmore looked like she might be sick. What happens now? Now we complete our review, I said. We'll be conducting interviews with current students and families, examining all complaint records in detail, and assessing whether Westridge Academy is meeting its obligations under the partnership program. If we find that you've been systematically failing to protect subsidized students or creating a hostile environment for them, your public funding will be terminated and you'll be removed from the partnership program. That would be devastating for the school, the assistant principal said. We rely on that funding. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before you created a two-tiered system where some students matter more than others based on their family's ability to pay, I replied. Education is supposed to be the great equalizer, the place where every child has the opportunity to learn and grow regardless of their background. But you've turned it into just another institution that reinforces inequality and teaches children that money and status matter more than character and compassion. I stood up, and my team followed suit. We'll be back tomorrow to continue our review. In the meantime, I expect you to provide us with complete access to all complaint records, incident reports, and disciplinary files for the past 7 years. And Principal Whitmore, I want you to think very carefully about the kind of school you want to lead, because right now, Westridge Academy is failing the students who need it most. As we walked out of that conference room, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in finally being able to confront the injustice that had been done to Maya and Emma and so many other students. There was anger at how long this pattern had been allowed to continue. But there was also sadness, because I knew that changing a school's culture was harder than just exposing its problems. Over the next 2 weeks, my team conducted a thorough review of Westridge Academy. We interviewed current students, including several subsidized tuition students who told heartbreaking stories of being bullied, excluded, and made to feel like they didn't belong. We found evidence of complaints being actively discouraged or dismissed without proper investigation. We discovered that teachers who tried to advocate for subsidized students often faced retaliation or were pressured to be less sensitive to social dynamics. We also found some surprising things. The donation made in Maya's name had come from Dr. Patricia Morrison, my mentor, who was also a Westridge alumna and had been horrified when she learned about Maya's expulsion. She'd made the donation as a statement, a way of saying that Maya belonged on that wall even if the school hadn't recognized her worth. Several teachers had left Westridge over the years specifically because they were frustrated with how bullying complaints were handled. And there were a handful of administrators and teachers who genuinely cared about all students and had been trying to push for changes from within. But the overall picture was damning. Westridge Academy had created and maintained a system that privileged wealthy students and marginalized those on subsidized tuition. The culture of the school sent a clear message. Some students mattered more than others, and if you couldn't afford to pay full tuition, you should be grateful for the opportunity and not make waves. My final report to the school board was comprehensive and unsparing. I recommended that Westridge Academy's participation in the partnership program be suspended pending significant reforms. I outlined specific requirements they would need to meet to be reconsidered. Implementing a robust anti-bullying program with clear protocols for investigating and addressing complaints. Providing training for all staff on equity and inclusion. Creating an independent oversight committee that included parents from subsidized families, and demonstrating measurable improvement in retention and school climate for subsidized students. The school board voted unanimously to accept my recommendations. Westridge Academy lost its public funding and was removed from the partnership program. The decision made headlines in the local news, with several former students and families coming forward to share their experiences. The story of Maya's expulsion became public, and there was significant community outrage about how the situation had been handled. Principal Whitmore resigned 2 weeks later. In her resignation letter, which was made public, she acknowledged that she had failed to create an equitable environment for all students and that her leadership had prioritized the wrong things. It wasn't the apology I'd hoped for, but it was something. The Hartleys, whose daughter Sophia had been at the center of so many complaints, withdrew from the school board and significantly reduced their involvement with the school. I heard through the grapevine that Sophia had struggled in college, unable to handle environments where her family's money and status didn't protect her from consequences. I felt a pang of sadness for her, because she'd been failed by the adults in her life who had taught her that cruelty without consequences was acceptable. Emma's family reached out to me after the story became public. Emma was in her second year of college now, studying to be a teacher, and she wanted me to know how much it meant to her that someone had finally held Westridge accountable for what had happened. She and Maya had remained close friends, supporting each other through the years, and both of them had been shaped by their experience in ways that made them stronger and more committed to justice. The story could have ended there, with Westridge Academy facing consequences and my family moving forward. But something unexpected happened. 3 months after Principal Whitmore's resignation, I received a letter from Westridge's Board of Trustees. They wanted to meet with me. I was skeptical, assuming they wanted to argue against the sanctions or try to negotiate a faster path back into the partnership program. But when I arrived at the meeting, I found something different. The board had undergone significant changes. Several members who had been closely aligned with wealthy donors had resigned or been replaced. The new board chair was a woman I recognized from parent advocacy groups, someone who had been pushing for reforms at Westridge for years. "Superintendent Chen, thank you for meeting with us," she said. "We know we have a long way to go to repair the damage that's been done to Westridge's culture and reputation. We're committed to making real changes, not just cosmetic ones designed to get our funding back. We want to rebuild this school into a place where every student truly matters, regardless of their family's wealth or status." She outlined the steps they'd already taken: hiring a new principal with a strong background in equity and inclusion, implementing comprehensive anti-bullying programs, creating support systems for subsidized students, and establishing an independent oversight committee. They'd also reached out to former students and families who had left because of bullying or discrimination, offering apologies and asking for their input on how to do better. "We'd like to invite Maya to speak to our students and staff," the board chair said. "We want them to hear her story, to understand the real consequences of the culture we allowed to develop here. We want her to be part of our transformation." I was stunned. This was more than I'd expected, more than I'd hoped for. But I told them I would need to talk to Maya first, that this had to be her choice. That night, I called Maya and told her about the meeting. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Do you think they really mean it?" she finally asked. "Or is this just about getting their funding back?" "I think some of them really mean it," I said honestly. The board has changed. There are people there now who genuinely want to do better. But you don't owe them anything, sweetheart. If you don't want to do this, if it would be too painful to go back there, you can say no. Can Emma come with me? She asked. If I do this, I want her there. Our story isn't just about me standing up for her. It's about both of us surviving something that should never have happened and refusing to let it break us. 2 weeks later, Maya and Emma stood in front of an assembly at Westridge Academy. The entire student body was there, along with all the staff and many parents. I sat in the audience, watching my daughter, now a confident young woman studying social work, tell her story. She talked about what it was like to watch someone being bullied and feel helpless. She talked about the moment she decided she couldn't be a bystander anymore, even knowing what it might cost her. She talked about being expelled and how devastating it felt to be punished for trying to protect someone. Emma spoke too, about the months of torment she'd endured, about how it felt to report bullying over and over again, only to be told she was overreacting or needed to try harder to fit in. She talked about the panic attacks, the fear of going to school, the sense that she didn't matter because her family didn't have money or connections. But they also talked about resilience and growth. They talked about finding a school where they were valued, teachers who saw them as whole people, about learning that their worth wasn't determined by how others treated them. They talked about choosing compassion and courage even when it was hard, about standing up for what was right even when there were consequences. The students listened in rapt silence. Some were crying. When Maya and Emma finished speaking, the new principal stood up and addressed the assembly. What happened to Maya and Emma should never have happened at Westridge Academy or anywhere else, she said. We failed them. We failed to create a safe environment. We failed to protect vulnerable students. We failed to hold bullies accountable. And we failed to recognize that true excellence in education isn't about test scores or college admissions or prestigious awards. It's about developing human beings who treat each other with dignity and respect, who stand up for what's right, who understand that their worth and others' worth isn't measured by money or status. She outlined the changes that had been implemented and the work that still needed to be done. She introduced the new Oversight Committee, which included several parents of subsidized students. She announced a new scholarship program named after Maya and Emma, specifically designed to support students who demonstrated compassion and moral courage. After the assembly, students lined up to talk to Maya and Emma. Some wanted to apologize for their own behavior, or for not speaking up when they witnessed bullying. Others wanted to share their own experiences of being marginalized or excluded. Several students approached me to say that my daughter was their hero, that her courage had inspired them to think differently about what it meant to stand up for others. One girl, a current subsidized student, came up to me with tears streaming down her face. I was about to leave Westridge, she said. I couldn't take it anymore. But hearing Maya's story, knowing that things are really changing, it gives me hope that I can stay and that it will get better. That moment made everything worth it. All the years of struggle, all the nights studying while exhausted, all the times I'd wanted to give up, they had led to this. To being able to protect students like this girl, to creating systems that valued all children, to ensuring that what happened to Maya and Emma would be less likely to happen to others. Over the following year, I continued to monitor Westridge Academy's progress. They worked hard to implement the required reforms, and slowly, their culture began to shift. The retention rate for subsidized students improved dramatically. Complaints of bullying decreased, and when complaints were filed, they were investigated thoroughly and addressed appropriately. The school began to develop a reputation not for exclusivity and prestige, but for genuine excellence that included character development and social responsibility. 2 years after my initial review, Westridge Academy applied to rejoin the partnership program. My team conducted another comprehensive evaluation, and this time, What we found was dramatically different. Students reported feeling safe and valued regardless of their background. Teachers described a collaborative culture focused on supporting all students. The oversight committee was functioning effectively, providing accountability and ensuring that subsidized families had a voice in school decisions. I recommended that Westridge be readmitted to the partnership program, with continued monitoring to ensure the changes were sustainable. The school board approved the recommendation, and Westridge Academy became a model for other schools trying to create more equitable environments. Maya graduated from college with honors and began working as a social worker, specializing in school-based interventions for at-risk youth. Emma became a middle school teacher, the kind of teacher who noticed the quiet kids, who intervened when she saw bullying, who created a classroom where every student felt valued. Both of them credited their experience at Westridge, as painful as it had been, with shaping their commitment to advocacy and justice. As for me, I continued my work as superintendent, always keeping in mind that day 7 years ago when I'd sat in Principal Whitmore's office feeling small and powerless. I used my position to implement district-wide reforms to address bullying, to create more equitable systems, to ensure that every student had advocates who would fight for them. I pushed for policies that held schools accountable for how they served their most vulnerable students, not just their most privileged ones. I also stayed in touch with Westridge Academy, watching their continued transformation with a mix of satisfaction and cautious optimism. Real change was hard and took time, but it was possible when people were willing to do the difficult work of examining their biases and restructuring their systems. One spring afternoon, 5 years after that initial review, I received an invitation to speak at Westridge Academy's graduation ceremony. The senior class had requested me specifically, wanting to hear from someone who understood what it meant to fight for justice and create change. I accepted, honored, and a little nervous about returning to a place that held so many difficult memories. On graduation day, I stood at the podium looking out at the sea of students in their caps and gowns. I saw faces of all different backgrounds, students from wealthy families sitting beside students on subsidized tuition, all of them celebrating together. The new principal introduced me warmly, acknowledging my role in transforming not just Westridge, but schools throughout the district. I talked about my journey from that grocery store clerk to superintendent, about the power of education to change lives, about the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. I talked about Maya and Emma and what their courage had taught me about the kind of person I wanted to be and the kind of world I wanted to help create. 7 years ago, I stood in an office in this building and was told that my daughter didn't belong here because she had defended someone who was being hurt. I said. I was told that violence wasn't tolerated, but what I learned was that certain kinds of violence were very much tolerated. The violence of exclusion, of cruelty, of using power to hurt those who have less. That violence was ignored and even protected because it came from the right families. I paused, looking around at the students and families, listening intently. But here's what I want you to understand. Real violence isn't standing up to protect someone who's being hurt. Real violence is standing by and doing nothing while someone suffers. Real violence is creating systems that value some people more than others, based on their wealth or status or background. Real violence is teaching children that their worth is determined by how much money their parents have. The students graduating today are leaving a school that is fundamentally different from the one I encountered 7 years ago. You're leaving a place that has learned, through painful experience, that true excellence means treating every person with dignity and respect. You're leaving with the knowledge that your worth isn't determined by your family's bank account, but by your character, your compassion, and your courage. As you go out into the world, I challenge you to remember what you've learned here. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Question systems that privilege some people while marginalizing others. Use whatever power and influence you gain to create more justice, more equity, more compassion in the world. And never ever believe that someone's worth can be measured by their wealth or status or background. The applause when I finished was thunderous. Students stood, parents stood, even the board members stood. I saw tears on many faces, including my own. After the ceremony, students and families lined up to talk to me, to thank me, to share their own stories of transformation and growth. One young woman, graduating with honors and heading to an Ivy League school on a full scholarship, took my hand and said, "I'm a subsidized student." 3 years ago, I almost left Westridge because I felt like I didn't belong. But the changes you pushed for, the culture shift that happened because of your daughter's courage, it made it possible for me to stay and thrive. I'm going to college because of what you did. Thank you. That night, I called Maya to tell her about the graduation. She was in graduate school now, working toward her MSW, still committed to helping vulnerable kids. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," she said. "You took the worst thing that ever happened to us and turned it into something that's helped thousands of students. You proved that one person standing up for what's right really can change the world." "I learned that from you, sweetheart," I said. "You were the one who showed me what courage looks like. You were the one who refused to be a bystander. I just followed your example." "We make a good team," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Looking back now, I can see how that terrible day 7 years ago set both of us on paths we never could have imagined. Maya's expulsion for defending Emma led me to advocacy, to education, to a career dedicated to protecting students and creating more just systems. It led Maya to social work, to a life committed to helping others. It led Emma to teaching, to being the kind of educator who would never let a student suffer in silence. The injustice we experienced became the catalyst for change that rippled out far beyond our own lives. Westridge Academy transformed from a place that protected bullies to one that developed leaders of character. The district implemented policies that better protected vulnerable students across all schools. Other districts looked at our model and adopted similar reforms. But more than any systemic change, what mattered most was the message we were able to send to students everywhere. Your worth is not determined by your family's wealth or status. Your character matters more than your connections. Standing up for what's right, even when it costs you something, is always the right choice. And sometimes, the worst moments of your life can become the foundation for something beautiful and transformative. What an incredible journey Maya and I took from that devastating afternoon in Principal Whitmore's office to the day I stood on Westridge's stage as the superintendent who had transformed their school. Her story reminds us that standing up for what's right, even when it comes at a tremendous personal cost, can create ripples of change that extend far beyond what we can imagine. Have you ever made a choice between doing what's expected and doing what's right, even knowing it might cost you everything? Have you ever witnessed someone stand up to injustice when everyone else was looking away? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear about the moments when you or someone you know chose courage over convenience, compassion over conformity. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that true worth comes from character, not status, and that one person's courage really can change the world, please show your support by hitting that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss our inspiring stories about real people whose integrity and compassion transformed their lives and the lives of others. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.